This is the Puente Grande prison, one of the toughest and most secure prisons in Mexico. The most special thing about this prison was its security. 2 guards were assigned to every single prisoner. This was because Mexico's most dangerous criminals were kept here. Among these criminals were also the big gang leaders of the drug mafia. These were not ordinary criminals. They were people who had thousands of armed followers and men under their command. Their power and network were so vast that an attack inside the prison could happen at any time. Keeping this danger in mind, the prison walls were built from thick concrete and extremely strong steel. There were watchtowers at every corner. Checkpoints were placed on the roads, and security personnel were always on full alert. The prison looked more like a military base. This was the same prison where El Chapo was imprisoned. He was not only Mexico's but the world's most notorious drug lord, the head of the Sinaloa Cartel, a gang that was considered dangerous all around the world. Its name came from the Mexican state of Sinaloa, where this network began. El Chapo was first arrested in 1993 after a massive struggle, but even inside prison, he continued to run his empire through bribery. He gave a lot of money to every guard and officer in the prison. Because of that, he was allowed every kind of luxury inside. He was living a lavish life. Alcohol, women, his favorite food, everything was available to him inside the jail. Even his 2 wives and his mistress used to come to visit him and often stayed overnight. He also had phones through which he continued to run his gang operations from inside the prison. The man who helped El Chapo the most inside the prison was Damaso Lopez, who at that time was the deputy security chief of Puente Grande prison. El Chapo bribed him so heavily that he became his right-hand man. El Chapo gave Damaso a house, a car, gifts, and a huge salary. Because of this, their relationship grew stronger and they became close friends. Damaso was the biggest reason El Chapo was living such a comfortable life inside the prison. He could do whatever he wanted. While being in jail, El Chapo not only managed his gang, but also discovered a new way of drug smuggling. Although the idea might not have been originally his, he and his gang took it to a whole new level. Tunnels. Smuggling drugs through tunnels. El Chapo hired professional engineers, architects, and experts so that the tunnels could be built in such a way that no one would ever suspect them. The main target of these tunnels was the United States, because that's where they earned the most profit. Now the Sinaloa Cartel didn't have to smuggle drugs through sea routes, air routes, or even land routes. They started sending drugs underground. Because of this, the scale of their smuggling increased many times. Now they were earning almost $20 million every month. Imagine, El Chapo's empire had grown even bigger while he was in jail, even more so than when he was outside. The United States kept pressuring Mexico to hand over criminals like El Chapo to them, because they were the ones suffering the most damage. However, Mexico kept refusing, saying they could handle their criminals themselves. They argued that their prisons were more secure, and that criminals there would be cut off from their gangs. Mexico's refusal gave El Chapo confidence. He believed that since he could control everything from inside, there was no need to escape. But in 2000, the Mexican Supreme Court passed a new law that allowed some criminals to be extradited to the United States. As soon as El Chapo found out about this law, he felt threatened. He realized he might be sent to America soon. So he started planning to escape from prison. Within a few weeks, he made a complete plan and began executing it. El Chapo knew very few people should be involved in this plan, so he gave Damaso a huge bribe and told him clearly that he wanted to escape. Damaso assured him of full support. The plan was made that on January 19, 2001, the number of guards would be reduced, but not in the whole prison, only in the section where El Chapo was. El Chapo bribed a laundry worker named Chito with a large sum of money. Chito's job was to collect prisoners' dirty clothes, put them in a trolley, take them out of the prison, and deliver them to the laundry van. He was a low-level worker. Nobody paid much attention to him, and even the guards ignored him. That's why he was perfect for this job. Then came the day when the plan was executed. Chito opened El Chapo's cell, hid him inside the laundry trolley, covered him with clothes, and slowly pushed the trolley out. Because there were fewer guards, everything went smoothly. When Chito reached the prison gate pushing the trolley, a guard was standing there. Chito stopped the trolley and started talking to the guard about opening the gate. At that moment, because of El Chapo's weight, the trolley began rolling backward. El Chapo panicked, thinking the trolley would hit the wall, tip over and expose him. But Chito quickly ran and stopped the trolley before it hit the wall. After that, he pushed the trolley to the prison parking area, where a car was waiting. El Chapo immediately got into the trunk, and they drove out of the prison. The car was being driven by one of the prison guards, who had already been bribed. That's why when they passed through the main gate, no one stopped them or checked the vehicle. Although the escape was discovered soon, the police didn't take immediate action. The reason was that much of the local police was already on El Chapo's payroll. They deliberately stayed still, so El Chapo could get far away from the prison. Later, when the federal police were informed, the ones who couldn't be easily bought, they began the chase. But by that time, El Chapo's men, who were already waiting near the prison, had taken him away. When El Chapo reached his associates, he immediately changed cars and got into a bulletproof vehicle. From there, he was taken to another location where a helicopter was already waiting. He got in, and it flew him to another place, where another car was waiting. In this way, he was moved across 4 different safe houses, so his location couldn't be tracked. Finally, El Chapo's last car was driving through the streets of Mexico City. When he looked outside, he saw police cars and motorcycles all around it. He panicked, thinking the real police had caught him. He asked the driver, "How did they find out I'm here?" The driver smiled and said, "Don't worry, they're all here for your security." El Chapo sighed in relief. In fact, all those vehicles belonged to corrupt officers who were protecting him from the real police. No one could have imagined that El Chapo was being escorted with so much police security. They took him to a safe hideout. In 2001, his escape made him a legend. People began to believe he was above the law and untouchable. The Mexican government spent enormous resources trying to find him, but El Chapo remained out of reach for a full 14 years. During those 14 years, El Chapo hid in remote mountain regions. But even while hiding, his empire didn't stop. It grew even faster. Every year, he sent billions of dollars worth of cocaine to the United States. The Sinaloa Cartel's influence and network became so massive that it took direct control of many parts of Mexico. The Sinaloa Cartel had now become the world's largest drug syndicate, surpassing even Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel. Such a vast empire couldn't exist without violence. The level of bloodshed was horrific, especially in northern cities near the border, because that's where most of the drugs were shipped and where the clashes happened. These cities turned into war zones. El Chapo and his gang eliminated every rival one by one and took complete control of the northern regions. Now the entire drug smuggling route from Mexico to the US was under El Chapo's control. Both the Mexican and US governments were ready to do anything to capture him. After being on the run for a full 14 years, Mexican intelligence, working together with a US agency, adopted a new strategy. This time the focus was not on tracking El Chapo's location, but rather on his closest people, his sons, his wives, and his trusted associates, because it was through them that he could be captured. Thanks to this strategy, they succeeded in reaching his technical assistant. This person was a 20-year-old Colombian boy. The agencies convinced him to join them. Through him, the agencies hacked the encrypted communication system used by El Chapo's gang. Now they had an idea of El Chapo's location. He was hiding in a Sinaloa safe house that was considered his territory. On February 17, 2014, the Mexican Air Force and the UNTI surrounded El Chapo's safe house and launched the operation. But this was no ordinary house. Behind the main door there was another strong steel door. The special forces were constantly hammering it, trying to break it down. El Chapo was in a deep sleep inside. Suddenly his assistant burst into the room shouting, "The army is here." El Chapo sprang up instantly, and could clearly hear the noise at the outer door. The forces outside had seen movement inside the house through the windows. They thought people inside were trying to flee, so they began to batter the door even harder. The house's windows were small and bulletproof, so all efforts were focused on breaking the door. Finally the door broke, and the forces entered with weapons drawn. Everyone was ordered to lie on the ground. But when they searched the house, there was no one inside. They checked every room and every corner but found nobody. This was astonishing because from outside they had seen shadows inside the house. So the question was, where had El Chapo gone? In fact, when his assistant had come to wake him, El Chapo had gone straight to the bathroom. Not to hide there but to escape through a secret tunnel. El Chapo's gang had not only become expert in drug smuggling, but also in building tunnels. Under each of his safe houses there were such tunnels, so that in case of a raid he could immediately flee. This time too El Chapo escaped through the tunnel built under the bathtub. When El Chapo entered the tunnel, he pulled the bathtub back into place and closed. With the help of a hydraulic system, the bathtub moved up and down easily. But without knowledge, no one could guess a tunnel was there. Because of this, it took the special forces a long time to search the house thoroughly. Finally, when they carefully examined the bathroom walls and floor, they found the hidden passage. But by then it was too late. El Chapo, his wife, his assistant and his chef had all escaped through that tunnel. This time El Chapo decided to go to a busy, ordinary place instead of a remote mountain hideout. He went to the tourist destination Mazatlan in Mexico. No one could imagine such a big criminal could be hiding there. But El Chapo had no idea of one thing. His communication network had already been hacked. He thought the police had found his safe house by mere luck. He did not know that agencies could now track him wherever he went. Just 5 days after his escape, on February 22, 2014, Mexican and American agencies arrested him at the Marbella Hotel in Mazatlan. He was relaxing in his room. He had no bodyguard. There was no security. He had no expectation that his location would be found so quickly, because he did not even know his phone network had been hacked. After the second arrest, El Chapo was kept in Altiplano prison, which was Mexico's most secure and high-security jail. Now you might wonder why he wasn't kept there. The first time, the answer is that when El Chapo was first arrested in 1993, Altiplano prison had only recently been built and was not as strong as it was in Altiplano prison resembled a military base. Watchtowers surrounded it. Each tower had 3 to 4 armed guards. There was heavy security and advanced technology. The outer walls of the prison were not just iron fences. They were in 2 or 3 layers, and in many places thick concrete had been added. Some as thick as 1 meter. Moats had been constructed around the prison so that even if an external attack were attempted, it would be impossible to get inside, because the criminals housed there had their own private armies. Therefore the prison was always prepared for any possible attack. The entire prison complex was a no-fly zone. According to some reporters, anti-aircraft weapons were even kept there, so that attacks from the sky would be impossible. Moreover, the mobile network in the whole area was completely shut down. No mobile phone worked inside, which made it impossible to contact anyone outside from inside the prison. The most important thing was that the recruitment of guards and officers there was done only after very strict scrutiny, so that bribery or collusion would be unlikely. That is why Mexico's most dangerous gang leaders and criminals were kept in this prison. But no one had ever escaped until El Chapo arrived. As soon as El Chapo set foot in the prison, his mind turned to planning an escape. He feared that any day he might be extradited to the United States. Mobile phones did not work inside the prison, so his only way to contact the outside was through people who came to meet him in jail. The first among those who came to see El Chapo was his lawyer Oscar Lopez, and the second was his third wife Emma Cornell, whom he married. Emma was 32 years younger than him. Through his wife, El Chapo began sending messages to his children and gang members. His 4 sons were already playing important roles in the gang. But after his arrest, no one stepped forward to take full leadership. El Chapo had another man who was not family, but whom he considered his right hand. Damaso, the same Damaso who had been the deputy security chief at Puente Grande prison, and who had given El Chapo full freedom in jail. And when El Chapo first escaped, Damaso was accused of collusion and was fired. His return to government service was impossible, but the two had a deep friendship, so El Chapo brought him into his gang. Over time, Damaso's status rose, and after El Chapo's second imprisonment, he became the leader of the entire cartel. Damaso's journey from a security officer to the head of the world's most dangerous drug syndicate began. Now El Chapo started contacting Damaso and his children from inside the prison. Through his wife, Damaso and his son began working on an escape plan. Damaso himself had once been a security officer. He knew the prison's arrangements, weaknesses and security level well, which gave him an advantage in this plan. On the other hand, El Chapo spent most of his day inside his cell. He was allowed out for only 1 hour. A GPS tracker was always attached to his leg. His cell was under 24 hours camera surveillance. Although there was a small wall that gave a bit of privacy, every action was recorded. El Chapo knew that escaping from this prison was almost impossible. Still, he was determined that he would get out at any cost. And when it came to El Chapo and his gang, joining the tunnel plan was certain. But the big question was, where would the tunnel be dug and how? This time the digging had to be done from outside toward the inside, not from inside out. This may have been the first time in history that prisoners' people were digging the tunnel from outside, so that he could get out. The first step of this plan was to buy some land or property outside the prison, a place close enough to the prison so digging could start from there, but not so close that anyone would get suspicious. The problem was Altiplano prison was in a lonely, remote area, and around it there were only fields and empty land, no buildings nearby. A large prison standing completely alone. After much searching, El Chapo's gang found an empty construction site about 1.5 kilometers away from the prison. It was likely land that had once been used by farmers. There was an unfinished structure there that no one paid attention to. The gang bought that land and registered it in the name of a trusted man. Now they had a base to start digging. But the real challenge remained. Digging a tunnel all the way to El Chapo's cell was no easy task. His cell was under round-the-clock surveillance. And even if the tunnel reached the cell, how would he get out? The only blind spot was that small shower area hidden behind a little wall inside the cell. So the tunnel had to come out exactly in that small area. Now the problem was that a 1.5 kilometer long tunnel had to be dug from the outer prison walls to that shower. They had to reach that exact small spot without being seen at all. Reaching El Chapo's cell would have been a great achievement. Reaching that shower spot was even more impossible. Then El Chapo got a brilliant idea. Inspired by the GPS tracker that was attached to his leg under prison rules, he thought, why not secretly get a different GPS device inside? The plan was to smuggle a small GPS device inside the prison and place it in the shower area. The people digging from outside could pick up that signal and bring the tunnel to that exact point. The plan was perfect. But the biggest difficulty was how to smuggle the GPS into the prison. Altiplano prison was Mexico's most secure jail. Getting anything inside was almost impossible. There were many checkpoints inside and outside that were very hard to cross without being caught. Nothing that could be used as a weapon to escape was allowed in. Then El Chapo had another smart idea. He told his wife that the gang would hide the GPS device inside a watch and send it in. A simple watch with the device fitted inside. His wife easily brought the watch into the prison. The guards found nothing suspicious in it. For them it was an ordinary watch that posed no danger. Now through this watch, meaning the GPS device, El Chapo's men got the exact location. Excavation for that specific shower area had already begun. But now they had received a definite signal that the digging was continuing in the right direction. As mentioned earlier, El Chapo's gang was expert in digging tunnels. But this time, the tunnel they built was not ordinary in any sense. Its construction was completely professional and brilliant on an engineering level. The tunnel began from an unfinished building that was about 1.5 kilometers away from the prison. You look at the mouth of the tunnel, you would see strong wooden supports all around. The tunnel was about 10 meters deep. As soon as you entered, it was clear that this was not just an escape route, but the most sophisticated prison break tunnel ever made. Around 10 to 12 people were continuously working on building it. First, a ventilation system was prepared inside the tunnel. For this, ventilation pipes were laid throughout the tunnel, and an air pumping machine was installed at the tunnel's mouth. Apart from that, they installed thousands of bulbs inside the tunnel, so that there would always be light during the digging. A power generator was also installed, which was disguised to look like a cement grilling table, so that if anyone saw it from above, they would not suspect anything. This was very important for security reasons, because the prison was not very far away. If the guards suddenly conducted an inspection, nothing suspicious would be visible. The scale of this operation was enormous. Thousands of ventilation pipes, thousands of bulbs, and a huge amount of soil were dug out and removed, so carefully that no one saw or suspected anything. Even though the prison was so close and surrounded by open fields, nothing was visible from the watchtowers. This proved that El Chapo's men had planned every single thing in this operation with great intelligence. Not only that, but inside the tunnel they even built a small railway line, on which a specially designed excavation vehicle ran. This vehicle was connected to a kind of motorcycle, which was used to remove soil during the digging, and later this same vehicle was to be used by El Chapo for his escape. While the digging was going on, El Chapo grew restless inside the prison. He was constantly afraid that he might be handed over to America any day. That's why he kept sending letters to his people again and again, asking why it was taking so long. The reply was always the same: the work was not easy. Everything had to be done with extreme care and planning. Finally, in June 2015, El Chapo received the news that the tunnel was almost complete. He fixed his escape date as July 4. But why July 4? Because July 4 is America's Independence Day. El Chapo chose that day intentionally to mock America. He wanted to show that while America celebrated its freedom, he escaped right under their noses. He hated America deeply, even though his earnings came from there. He knew the American agencies wanted him at any cost, and were constantly pressuring the Mexican government to hand him over. But unfortunately, on July 4 the tunnel was not yet complete. The work was still unfinished, so the operation was postponed for a week. And then came that night, July 11. The CCTV footage from that night shows El Chapo sitting in his cell watching a comedy show on his tablet at high volume, so that the sound of digging from below would be drowned out. He kept getting up, walking around the room, and waiting for the signal from his team. At 8, El Chapo sat on the edge of his bed, put on his shoes, and went straight to the shower area, the only part of the cell that was not visible to the cameras. And at that very moment, El Chapo disappeared. He entered the tunnel and climbed down the stairs, where his wife's brother was already waiting. He pointed toward a small trolley-like vehicle, and said, "Get on quickly." El Chapo sat on it, and sped away toward the other end of the tunnel. When he reached the other side, he emerged into a brick building. There a four-wheeler bike was already waiting. He got on it and sped away with his men. It took the prison guards a full 40 minutes to realize that El Chapo had escaped. When they looked at the monitor, they saw that El Chapo was not in his cell. At first they thought he might be hiding in the shower area, but when they checked the walls and found the mouth of the tunnel, they were stunned. Immediately the alarm was raised throughout the prison. The entire system was put on high alert. But by then it was too late. El Chapo was already far away. He reached a large truck and hid inside its trailer. His men locked the trailer tightly so that no one could see inside. The truck drove for about 2 hours, and reached a place called San Juan in the Querétaro region. There El Chapo boarded a private jet, whose pilot was a highly trusted man. This time, El Chapo took no risk. He had arranged 2 jets, one to take him to his real location, and the other as a decoy to mislead anyone following him. El Chapo hid himself in his own secure hideout, built in the Sinaloa mountains, which he called Sky. It was the safest and strongest place for him. But this time, his escape brought immense embarrassment to the Mexican government worldwide. Just a year earlier, they had called El Chapo's arrest the biggest victory in the fight against drugs and crime. Now the government threw almost all its power and resources into capturing him again. If El Chapo had stayed hidden there, it might have been difficult to catch him, but he made the same mistake again and again. He kept traveling to different cities, visiting his gang's hideouts, meeting people, and giving orders to maintain his control and leadership. But this habit became his biggest weakness. Tracking El Chapo's movements became easier now, especially because Mexican agencies were receiving support from the Americans. The US agencies provided advanced monitoring and tracking technology, making surveillance more precise than ever. Mexican intelligence found a lead about a house in the northern Sinaloa city of Los Mochis. During the investigation, they observed suspicious activity from El Chapo's gang at that house. They began intercepting calls and noticed that the gang members kept mentioning the name Grandma. They would say things like, "Grandma is coming, get ready." Although it sounded like a woman's name, it was clear this was a code name for an important person, possibly El Chapo himself. The intelligence officers grew suspicious that Grandma might indeed be El Chapo. The next day, 3 vehicles arrived in a convoy, clearly indicating someone important had arrived. The vehicles drove straight into the garage. At that point, the agencies didn't have solid proof of who was inside, but now they were alert. For several days, Surveillance and call interception continued. Gradually, their suspicion turned into certainty when a voice on one of the intercepted calls sounded exactly like El Chapo's. Moreover, such heavy security and preparation could only be for him, no one else. On the morning of January 8, 2016, 6 months after El Chapo's escape, Mexican security forces finally decided to act. The special forces and DEA agents surrounded the entire house and launched the operation. As soon as the team entered, El Chapo's men opened heavy fire. A fierce gunfight broke out on both sides, in which all those killed were El Chapo's gang members. Some special forces soldiers were injured, but none were killed because the operation had been carried out with full planning and preparation. However, when the firefight ended and the house was searched, El Chapo was gone once again. He had escaped again through a tunnel. Inside the house, behind a mirror, there was a secret door that opened into a tunnel. While his men were fighting the special forces, El Chapo and his trusted associates had escaped through that tunnel. As soon as they came out, they hijacked a car passing on the road and fled. But the security forces were not just surrounding the house, they were spread across the entire area. As soon as news of El Chapo's escape spread, multiple patrol units became active. About 20 kilometers away, at a checkpoint, 4 federal police officers stopped El Chapo and his associate and arrested them. El Chapo tried to bribe them, but unfortunately for him, this time he was facing honest officers who refused the bribe. Enraged, El Chapo began cursing and threatening them, but the officers ignored his words. They took his photo and sent it to their commander. The commander immediately warned them that El Chapo's men might be planning a counterattack and instructed them to take cover. The officers were ordered to go to the nearest motel, secure themselves, and monitor the situation. The 4 officers took El Chapo to a nearby motel, rented a room, and locked it from inside. They were ready for any possible attack and continued to keep watch outside. While the officers and El Chapo waited in the motel room, they suddenly heard the sound of vehicles approaching from a distance. It seemed like a large convoy was slowly heading their way. El Chapo looked at the police officers with a crooked smile and said, "Now you must be thinking you should have taken my bribe." But his smile didn't last long. As soon as the convoy came closer, he realized they weren't his. It was the army and special forces. Hundreds of soldiers had surrounded the entire area. All hotel entries and exits were sealed. El Chapo's gang, seeing such a massive force, was completely shocked. None of them dared to move forward. El Chapo was arrested for the 3rd time and sent back to the Altiplano prison, the same prison from which he had escaped before. But this time, things were different. He was kept under strict watch, and every movement was recorded. Still, El Chapo began planning another escape. He again sent messages to his gang to start preparing. Some gang members even claimed that they had begun working on another tunnel plan, again using the same method. But by now, the Mexican government had had enough. They decided that El Chapo would be handed over to America, because that was the only remaining solution. This was the same man who had escaped from Puente Grande prison in 2001. Remained out of reach for 14 years, then escaped again through a tunnel built under a bathtub, and once more through a secret passage, hidden behind a mirror. Stopping him in Mexico had become nearly impossible. If he stayed in Mexico, he would one day escape again because his men were everywhere. But in America, he could do nothing. There would be no bribery, no tunnels. That's why the court began the process of extraditing him to the United States. But in October 2016, the judge handling his case was assassinated. Because of that, the extradition process was delayed for a year. Then in January 2017, one day suddenly, El Chapo was taken out of prison, handcuffed, and put into a helicopter. He didn't understand what was happening. After some time, the plane landed in New York. El Chapo looked around, shocked, silent and helpless. He asked a DEA agent, "Where am I?" The agent replied, "You're in New York." That was the moment when the world's most powerful drug lord stepped out silently, with tears in his eyes. El Chapo's trial took place in America, and went on for a long time. During the trial, many witnesses, pieces of evidence, and shocking revelations came to light. Finally, in 2019, El Chapo was sentenced to life imprisonment. Today, El Chapo is imprisoned in America's most secure prison, ADX, located in Colorado. It is considered the most secure prison in the United States. The prisoners kept here are those who are considered the most dangerous. El Chapo spends 23 hours a day alone in a small cell. He is allowed out for only 1 hour, even then, only within a corridor inside the prison under strict supervision. Perhaps he still thinks about escape, but every time he looks at the walls, he realizes that now he is far away from the world. A world where once his name was feared by everyone, and perhaps now, once again, his eyes fill with tears. So friends, this is where the astonishing true story of El Chapo ends. If you liked the video, please like it, and stay connected for more such true stories. Thank you.